don't actually see.
I got it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we are recording this webinar, so it will be available for you to check out on our YouTube channel at a further date. So don't stress too much if you are trying to take notes. They'll be available to you later. Again, thank you so much for joining us for Inspiring Schoolyard Investigations on this March evening. So for those of you who haven't joined us for a webinar before, we are using the Zoom platform. This platform is a pretty nice one, but when I went full screen, it probably went automatically full screen for you, and I do recommend that you actually exit full screen, which will probably be up here. It might be under options, and that way that will allow you to dock the chat window. So you're going to want to come down here and click on the speech bubble here that says chat, and open up that chat window. We will be having opportunities to discuss a couple things throughout the webinar, and I'd love for you to be able to see each other's responses. Along with that, down here at the bottom where you see where you type your message, please make sure to switch to all panelists and attendees. The default just says panelists, which is a bummer because only I can see it and Lindsay and then not everybody else. So I'd love for you to be able to share ideas with each other. So let's go ahead and test out our lovely Zoom platform and our chat window. And if you could go ahead and let me know in the chat window where you are joining us from and what kind of educator you are. Donna's joining us from Tennessee. Oh, state certified naturalist. Awesome. Our friend Heather from Medina. Our good friend Ann from Nevada. North Carolina. Homeschool classes for museum. Awesome. More on environmental ed from Ohio, New York City, St. Paul, Minnesota. Beth, you're probably sick of the snow out there, huh? Director of Technology from Miami. Fayetteville, Arkansas. Outdoor educator. Awesome. A few folks here tonight from North Carolina. That's cool. I always love North Carolina's EE scene. I think you guys have got a good thing going. Cindy joining us from Wisconsin. Awesome. Well, it looks like we have a great range of educators here tonight with us. Glad to see everybody's got their chat window going. So let's go ahead and dive right into tonight's subject. So we're coming to you live from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. This is that building here, and we're somewhere back in the middle on the top level here, or actually not the top level. And it is not this lush and green right now. It is snowy and cold, and when I woke up this morning it was 3 degrees and I thought that I was done with winter. I might need to take a page from the birds' books and start migrating. Specifically, I work with the K12 Education Team. My name is Kelly Schaefer and I'm our education specialist, and I'm joined by Lindsay Glassner tonight, who is our outreach coordinator. And our mission here on the K12 team is to create innovative resources and training that build science skills while inspiring young people to connect to local habitats, explore biodiversity, and engage in citizen science projects. Now, you may have noticed from across those two missions, the theme of citizen science is big here at the lab. So we place a lot of value on citizen science projects, and hopefully after today's webinar, if you haven't before, you will too. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about how to connect citizen science and inquiry-based learning. We're going to discuss some ways to combine modeling and STEM practices, and also look at some case studies of schoolyard investigations where citizen science has led to inquiry. So here at the K12 team, we have a ton of different resources available. So we often like to think of the resources we provide as being along a pathway of engagement. So we like to start with resources that really focus on nature connection. So getting kids outside, getting their hands dirty, exploring their local habitat, and developing a sense of place. And then from there, we try and move kids and educators along to participating in citizen science, which can be a really powerful learning experience and a powerful way to experience the science process. And then further along to doing inquiry. And so we'll examine those steps in closer detail as we go along tonight. So let's take a look at citizen science. I would love to know in the chat window what comes to your mind when you hear citizen science, some keywords, how would you define it, things like that. Go ahead and take a few seconds and share your ideas in the chat window. Nice. Heather's naming a few specific projects: iNaturalist, eBird, Project Feeder Watch. So non-professionals collecting data to be used by professional scientists. Yeah, that's a great definition. A wonderful opportunity to, as a novice, become part of a bigger picture. Another project is being called out specifically, eMammal, excuse me. A way for everyday people in non-science careers to make an impact on their environment. Fun ways to help the world be a better place. Science, specifically observations, data collection, etc., done by the general public. Yeah, these are all great definitions. And I love seeing people naming specific projects too. That's really cool. I really like the non-science careers part that from Becca's definition of citizen science. Because we really do view citizen science as projects in which volunteers, so regular folks like you and me, partner with professional scientists to answer real-world questions. So folks who are doing these projects might not have a science career, but they can still have a really big impact on scientific understanding of our natural world. And again, I think this real-world connection is really important for students. It can kind of answer that essential question of why we're doing what we're doing. So we like to think of it, if you go back to this image here, as regular folks helping to put together the puzzle pieces of our world and creating a picture and a better understanding. And we tend to focus on, in our discussions of citizen science, natural history related projects, but there are all sorts of different citizen science projects. There's one that comes to mind where you look at images of old manuscripts and mark ones that have drawings and things in the margins. So all sorts of different citizen science projects out there. And then I always love to share this image because I think it's a really beautiful image. And while we've got the chat window moving and shaking, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this image. What do you think you're looking at here? Too bright at night, light pollution. Yes, doesn't it look like light pollution? So this is, I don't know if I would classify it as a fully trick question, but it is a little bit of one because it absolutely 100% looks like light pollution. But Donna's got it right. It's places where people are engaging in citizen science. So This map is actually a specific citizen science project. So each point of light on this map is a submission to the eBird database. There is no underlying continental map here. The fact that we can see the shape of our world means there's that many people out there collecting data, submitting it to the eBird database. And I think this image is a really powerful image that shows the power of citizen science data. Like, how long would it take one scientist or a handful of scientists or even a whole generation of scientists to duplicate a database like this? It just wouldn't happen. It happens because of people power. So what this looks like when it comes down to the numbers are over 500 million observations in this database. So that shakes out to be about 33.6 million checklists with almost 500,000 participants. And the number that really gets me here is that 10,418 species of birds are logged in the eBird database. That is 98% of all of the bird species in the entire world that citizen science data has recorded observations on. And I think that's a pretty big deal. Although somebody was pointing out that we have some work to do in New Zealand, also Siberia. So yes, I think this is a really cool way to visualize the power of citizen science data. So hopefully that got you a little excited about it, but why citizen science as educators? Well, it provides this really awesome opportunity for us to get kids outside and participating in science in a meaningful way. Oftentimes when kids go out and they participate in these citizen science projects, all sorts of questions will naturally pop up, and it can lead to really cool scientific inquiry opportunities. So it also helps us meet, as educator, our STEM content standards, and really does it in a very natural way. And one of the benefits to our kids is they're learning all these awesome skills, but they're also developing a connection and a sense of place to where they are, which leads to environmental stewardship. It leads to a sense of ownership over their communities, and shows that they can have a positive impact in these spaces. It also provides us access to real life data while connecting us to the scientific community. Plus, it can be really, really, really fun. And part of what makes it so fun for kids is that they're learning while they're doing it. They have these awesome hungry minds that are ready to soak this stuff up. But they know that their data really matters. So they're not just doing an experiment that they're doing to learn how chemicals interact, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That can be really fun and exciting too. But what this has is that real world impact. Your data goes into a database that professional scientists are using to help us understand. So I want to take us back to that pathway again. So we spent some time just talking about the concept of citizen science and how that can engage kids. Now I want to kind of touch on the inquiry component of that, because we view citizen science as a powerful springboard to inquiry. So while you're taking kids outside to do citizen science and get that sense of place and start making observations in the natural world and following scientific protocols, those questions and those I wonders that pop up while you're outside can then be taken and turned into inquiry projects, where kids are then asking and answering their own questions in science, which is a really super authentic way to experience science learning. So what kind of things pop up in your head when you hear the word inquiry? That can be keywords again, definitions, some way that you've experienced inquiry. Shanna, I'm sorry if I said your name wrong, but you're saying curiosity and wonder, asking questions that can't be Googled, says Anne. I love that. That's so good. Heather saying active, hands-on, multiple solutions, not one easy answer. Ooh, I like that, Catherine. Thick questions that students can dig into. Thick. Yeah, meaty question. I like it. Donna saying having a question pop to mind that you really feel compelled to find the answer to. Awesome. Yes, all of these things. Inquiry can be all of these things for sure. I think the heart of it is that curiosity and that wonder. And then as educators, the real exciting part of getting kids involved in this is that aspect of having a question that you don't know the answer to and that you can dig into. Very cool. So we do kind of define it as asking and answering your own questions in science, which is that authenticity component that can make science learning so wonderful for kids. It does include what a lot of people would refer to as project-based learning. So what I do think about, though, when I think about inquiry as an educator is I get a little nervous sometimes when I'm engaging kids in inquiry because I don't know where it's going to go. So you have to be willing to go along for the ride a little bit and focus on kind of managing how kids are approaching their problems than necessarily having everything set out in a lesson plan, which can be mildly intimidating, but I also think it's super rewarding. So we like to hear, we think about inquiry as investigations too. So following this scientific process that's kind of iterative and grows on itself. If you're anything like me when you were in school, the scientific method that you were taught was very linear. And we find that it's a much more messy process. So maybe when you're outside, you have a question pop into your head, you're wondering about downy woodpeckers and what kind of food they eat. And then you realize that's a reference question. So you can look up those references and answer your question. So here maybe Google will serve you, but then you might find in there an inspiration about, well, what kind of suet would downies prefer versus hairy woodpeckers? And then that can become experiment that you could actually design and take observations on. So a lot of these things develop through a process of learning that's really authentic. And what's great about these processes is that they're naturally meeting a lot of our NGSS science and engineering practices. So getting outside and making observations and then asking questions based on those observations, developing a plan to carry out investigations, analyzing your data, which is going to involve using mathematics and constructing an explanation from your data. So there's so many of these practices that are going to be inherently met in doing inquiry, especially citizen science inspired inquiry, because they will have been getting a lot of experience with collecting data by participating in citizen science. And I did mention that sometimes getting involved in inquiry can be a little intimidating, and that's one of the reasons that I think using citizen science as a springboard can be a really effective way of diving into it in the classroom, because you'll have a citizen science project, if, for example, eBird, that focuses on identifying birds. And if you have the tools to do that citizen science project, it's very likely that the questions that are going to come out of that citizen science project are going to be bird related, and then you'll have the tools to go ahead and do inquiry on those questions, or around those questions, I should say. So I think it can be a really useful way, not just to inspire these inquiry investigations, but to kind of understand the scope of what your students are going to come up with among their questions. So if birds aren't your thing, and I don't know why they wouldn't be, but then I'm biased, there are citizen science projects out there for you. So if you're not into birds, but you're into plants, there's Project Budburst. If you're more into invertebrates, there's projects on crickets and monarchs and all of these good things. So there are ways for you to find projects that fit your student needs or your personal interests or whoever your audience is. If they're interested in something specific, there's probably a citizen science out there that's related. So there's some really great resources for you to get started with when you're looking to get your hands into citizen science. Citizenscience.org is the website for the Citizen Science Association. It's a lot of S's. SciStarter.com is another website that I highly recommend. And I'm actually going to pop out for a second and take us to SciStarter.
Which is now switched to SciStarter.org.
Oh, it's SciStarter.org now.
Yes.
Oops, sorry everybody. I think it automatically redirects still. Yeah. So you should get there all right. So SciStarter.org is a really, really awesome site. It's basically this huge repository of probably almost every citizen science project out there, or at least the larger ones. And what's really cool about this is if you want to search by topic, you can do that. So you could say, I know I want something around agriculture, so I'll search that. Or I know I want something around climate and weather, so I search that. Or if you know specifically you want something on insects, you can use the keyword search over here. Type in insects. I'm going to say it doesn't have to be near me, and I'm going to say find a project. So here we go. Bumblebee flower visitation in Tasmania. That's a cool one. I've not seen that one before. So caterpillars count, Nebraska monarch, and regal fritillary survey. So there's all sorts of different things on here. You can have a lot of fun going through. You can also find ones that are only online or ones that are only outside or ones that have a combination of these things. There's really good filters to check out here. So you can even say what kind of time commitment or you want to be able to do. So I know some folks were here from museums. So you could try at a science center, zoo, or aquarium to find a citizen science project that would work for you. So again, SciStarter.org, highly recommend. Cool place to find a project that will suit your needs.
It does redirect if you put it .com.
It does redirect. Thank you for checking, Lindsay. I will change that slide. Another resource that you might find helpful is this NSTA Press book that Jen Fee and Nancy Troutman, who are our Education Director and K12 Programs Manager, respectively. Actually, I think I got that mixed up in order. But anyway, they helped edit. These are 15 different lessons written by teachers that all involve different citizen science projects. So if you're looking for a place to start, this can be a good one. I think it still is. If you go to our website, there's a free sample chapter. I think that's still the case. We'll check on that. So here at the lab, we have 5 citizen science projects that are currently running. Project Feeder Watch, which is going right now, and it's November to April, and that's kind of giving us a survey of winter birds. I love this project because it has some really cool conservation implications. So this was the first data set that detected the decline in the evening grosbeak population, so very useful data for conservationists. Celebrate Urban Birds is a really wonderful project that combines bird observations with bird celebrations and getting your community involved in watching birds and caring about birds. The Great Backyard Bird Count just happened last month, 4 days in February. And then Nest Watch is another seasonal one, which happens during the breeding season here in North America. And of course, eBird, which is all over the place. Some of you may have noticed a change. We did used to have a 6th project called Habitat Network, and unfortunately, Habitat Network just sunsetted in January. So that's no longer available. And if you signed up early for this webinar, we did talk about using Habitat Network in our description because we did not realize it kind of was a sudden thing that it went away, unfortunately. So one of the things that Habitat Network let you do was map your habitat, and that was a really cool way to meet some modeling standards tied into NGSS. But however, even though you don't have a program to help you do that, I still think that mapping is a really cool way to get to know your environment. So what I've prepared for us tonight to look at are some ways that you could tie in mapping and citizen science to get to know your schoolyard better. So the vision for this is going outside and mapping your schoolyard. So whether you have a large one or a small one, defining your space, mapping where there are plants, where there's hardtop, what kind of plants you're seeing, then using citizen science to really survey that schoolyard for what's there. And based on that information and your ability, you can then see if you want to make some improvements for your local wildlife, including birds, and then monitor those improvements afterwards through citizen science to see what kind of changes occur based on your modifications. So when we think about mapping schoolyards, sometimes you'll have a small enough space that the whole class can just map the same area, doing a bird's eye view. I think it's also nice to bring in some measuring here if you can, have kids actually make a scale model. If you have a large class and a large space, you can even divide up the schoolyard into quadrants, so you can have a group of students mapping a certain quadrants and then bring it back into the classroom to kind of make a synthesis of it, so combining all those quadrants into a detailed map. And so then when you have your base map, taking the time to evaluate it, did you see the 4 components of habitat there? Did you see food available for wildlife, water, cover, and space? And then if you don't see those things, well, how could you change them, and what does that mean for the wildlife? And that's where citizen science can come into helping you understand your schoolyard better. And so I'm going to highlight 2 projects tonight, one of which somebody actually mentioned earlier in our discussion of citizen science, which was iNaturalist. So iNaturalist is a really cool program that's also worldwide, and it's pretty simple. So you go outside and you record your observations through mostly photographs. From there, you submit it to the database and share it with other naturalists, and then there's the opportunity to, as a community, discuss your findings. And I'm going to pop again over to the internet here and take a look at what some of that might look like. So these are my observations from when I was participating in iNaturalist a few years ago. All of these photos are taken with my very terrible phone camera, but they were good enough for identification photos. So you can see here, when you come to your observations, you can see the different things listed that you saw. So let's pick one to take a peek at. Let's look at some painted turtles here. So here's a photo of a painted turtle on a log. It's not a great photo, it's pretty far away, but it is enough to make an identification. And then you can see that I identified it as a painted turtle, and then somebody else from the community identified it as a painted turtle. And what's cool about this program is I could have put in this photo and been like, well, it's some kind of turtle, and the community could help you identify it. And this is seen as a research grade observation because enough people have said that it is the same thing and the photo is conclusive enough. So then this observation goes into a biodiversity database where scientists can access it and use it for research. And then over here on the map, you can see other places around where painted turtles were logged in the same area in iNaturalist. So if we go back, let's take a look at a different one here. Let's look at this mushroom. So this is one that is not marked as research grade. It says it still needs ID. And this is one that when I took that picture, it stood out to me because I've never seen anything like it here. And all I could say was, this is some kind of fungus, which is not super helpful. That's just the kingdom identification. But then somebody came in and they were like, okay, I think I know the order. It's a kind of guild mushroom. And then in her comment, she even said, oh, I think it's actually this type of species. And then somebody else came along and was like, using habitat clues and said, yes, it is this species. So it's cool to see how that identification evolved within the community. So there is the opportunity for, if you're out there in your schoolyard and you're making observations with your students and you can't identify what you've taken a picture of, this includes plants. So like I logged some jewelweed. So if you know you have some kind of plant that you think has berries or is a food plant, you can submit it to this iNaturalist database, and probably somebody in the community is going to help you identify it if you can't do it yourself in your guides that you have. So that can be a really cool way to get to know your schoolyard, figure out what kind of plants you have, and then you can do research on those plants and how wildlife native to your area use them. Another cool feature of iNaturalist is you can actually look at your sightings on a map. So I've zoomed in here earlier. So these are just a sampling of my sightings. You can tell I've done a lot around the Lab of Ornithology. And it's actually pretty specific. I was really pleased to see how site-specific these sightings were. So, I mean, depending on the size of your schoolyard, you might even be able to use this map to log different plants' locations and see where they are. So that can be a cool way to use iNaturalist. All right, so how does that actually work in the classroom? So we did have the Washington STEAM Academy tell us about their pollinator garden project. They're one of our success stories on our website. And they decided that they wanted to create a native pollinator garden. And within that garden, they wanted to study their native plants and they wanted to study monarchs. And so they used iNaturalist to log their sightings on the plants in their yard and the other animals they were seeing. And then when they did have monarchs, they started using Journey North to log that information. So Journey North is a project that monitors different sorts of migratory animals. I want to say mostly invertebrates, but definitely monarchs. There's a big emphasis on monarchs too. So 2 citizen science projects that they used. And so that on its own is a really cool project, right? Using citizen science, collecting this data, getting kids outside and making these really careful observations. But they took it a step further. So while their kids were out there collecting this data and tagging monarchs, they started to realize that the data collection process can be kind of tedious because it often requires some very careful record keeping, and that can be difficult. So these students decided, why don't we see if we can come up with a way to streamline this process? So they actually developed monarch tag prototypes with QR codes so that you could scan it and get all the data that you needed. So that's a really cool way to use citizen science to spark a problem-solving project like that. And I was so impressed by the results of that. So this can be a really useful way to springboard inquiry off of citizen science. And so the other project that I would like to highlight for you tonight is one we've talked about a little bit already. It's called eBird. And I'm a little bit biased because I really love eBird as a citizen science project. So we're actually going to take a second here to watch a video about eBird. And this video comes from the eBird Essentials online course, which will teach you everything you need to know about eBird. And I'll tell you more about that in a moment.
Every day, millions of people around the world enjoy watching birds and recording their sightings.
What if there were a way to take all of these observations, yours, ours, everyone's, and put them all in one place?
If we could do this, we would fundamentally transform not just birding, but science and conservation.
From this idea emerged eBird. Put simply, eBird is a way for anyone around the world to store their birding observations, their photos, their sound recordings, and make them available to educators, scientists, and birders. It's incredibly easy to use, and it's incredibly powerful. All you do is let us know where you went birding, when, how far you traveled, and what you saw. It's powerful because hundreds of thousands of people all around the world are doing it, and it's growing. eBird already safeguards 500 million sightings, information that allows all of us to understand the movements and needs of birds at global scales. eBird maintains your lists for you and shares them with other birders from around the world. By sharing, it's now possible for anyone, anywhere, to find your target birds and the best birding hotspots any time of the year. Before eBird, there was no way to comprehensively understand population-level movements of many species. By combining your sightings with remote-sensed habitat data from NASA, we're able to generate species distribution models that provide an unparalleled view of where and when birds are in the landscape. Scientists and students all over the world are now able to use eBird datasets for their research at a variety of spatial scales. These observations help inform better conservation strategies, opening the door to the future of bird conservation. And this is just the beginning. With the help of millions of people who come to eBird each year, we are creating a free, open access system that is easy to use, fun, and rewarding. Rewarding for birders, for scientists, for conservationists, and ultimately the birds themselves. Go to eBird.org or download eBird Mobile to get started, all for free. By joining eBird, you're joining a global team of people that share your passion for birds. Be a part of it.
I love that video. I love that video because I think it does a really good job of capturing a lot of the benefits of eBird and the power of such a large database. So as Ian said in the video, eBird really consists of identifying and counting birds and entering that data online or in the mobile app. And along with those observations, capturing this metadata here, who, where, when, and for how long did you go birding? So with all of that information, eBird is able to calculate things like effort, which allows them to control for group size and all these awesome things that allow them to then standardize the data and create those beautiful models that you saw in the video. So that might all sound great and fine and good, but hey, identifying birds can be kind of hard. There are tools out there that are very, very useful and will be a big help to you. So Merlin Bird ID is a really powerful free app from the lab that helps you identify birds. It asks you 5 questions, 2 of which your phone already knows. Where are you and what is the date? And then it asks the size of the bird on a scale of some common birds you probably already know. What were the three main colors, and then what was the bird doing? And then it will generate a list of birds that is tailored not just to your location, but to the time of year. And all of that is done using the eBird database. So all of that data that you help put into it then comes back to you in the form of this Merlin Bird ID app, which will help you become a better birder. And what's awesome about these is if you have access to smart devices, kids are so intuitive with this sort of technology that it can be super easy for them to pick up, but it also really helps them feel successful identifying birds from the get-go. And so I consider this to be a really smart use of technology in outdoor programs. I know we often worry about screen time when we're trying to get kids connected to nature, but I think this actually can be a really great way to lower the barrier to kids getting interested in identifying birds. And so I mentioned the eBird Essentials course, which is where that video came from. This course is a free course available to anybody. It would take you about an hour and a half to 2 hours to complete, and it's going to give you basically everything you need to know about eBird, including how that data is used, what kind of controls they use for data quality, the best ways to collect the data, what the implications are for conservation. So it's a super useful course. And then I want to share with you kind of a case study about how making bird observations has really led to a cool inquiry project at Hilltop for the third graders there. The educator at Hilltop had come to our educator retreat here in Ithaca one summer and gotten a free bird feeder from us and went back and was super excited to hang it out, and our kids were super excited to start making bird observations and submitting that to citizen science. But after having the feeder out there for a couple weeks, no birds came. And so they decided that they really needed to start understanding birds better so they could figure out why birds weren't coming to their feeder. So they went out and they made observations to figure out what birds were in their local area. They did reports on birds about what kinds of habitat they like, what they eat, where they live. So they turned it into a really cool framework for a project. And from there, learned that the reason that nobody was coming to their feeder was because there just wasn't any cover around it. It was just out in the open. And so birds weren't comfortable coming to a feeder that was so exposed. So their solution was to design a better feeder garden. And they looked at all sorts of different things. So the components of habitat like cover and space and all of these bushes and trees of different heights. They have like different canopy levels going on, which I think is super cool. Water features, bird houses, things like that. So after designing their plan, they went ahead and started making modifications to their schoolyard. So they did some lasagna gardening techniques to build up the soil in the window boxes, which allowed them to plant native plants. They did some raised garden beds. And then I'm happy to report that after making all of these awesome improvements, they put their bird feeders back out, and sure enough, the birds came, and they were able to start doing citizen science projects. So it was a really, really cool example of how these sorts of observations can turn into really deep projects for kids to dig into and to get more experience outside. So I love that example. I think it's a really, really cool way that the teacher went about solving their problem. So if all of this sounds good, but you feel like you would like a little bit more support before diving into citizen science and inquiry in your schoolyard investigations, we do have some resources that can help you. So Investigating Evidence, pictured here on the left, is a free downloadable curricula, which will guide you through the whole process of engaging in citizen science and then scaffolding the inquiry process. There's even like a timeline to help you plan it all out. And again, if birds aren't your thing, this curriculum is designed to work with any citizen science project. And then over here on the right, we have pictured our Inspiring Investigations Through Citizen Science course, which basically uses investigating evidence as the kind of textbook for a course that will give you all of the structure you need to better understand how to use inquiry in your classroom through videos and readings and activities. So definitely, if you're looking for some options to get some CEUs, this can be a good way to go about it. We also have our Bird Sleuth Investigator magazine, which is our student publication where all student writing and student science reports are published. So we really like to take kids through the full scientific process, including that key aspect of sharing your results. So you can, if you have students doing schoolyard investigations, write them up, submit them to us. We do have a bird focus in this magazine, so that's the type of investigations that we're likely to publish here. We do also share artwork and creative writing related to birds as well. And right now we also have the National Challenge rolling along. So the National Challenge is our effort to get teachers and students everywhere participating in schoolyard investigations around bird behavior at bird feeders. And we kind of view it as an opportunity to help people who are interested get started. So we provide you lots of support in emails. We provide you with exclusive content, published finalists. So, if you participate, you will get a $9 coupon for bird food, which I think comes with the download investigating evidence. And then if you become a finalist and you get published in the Bird Sleuth Investigator, then you get some nice goodies from us. And then the grand prize winner will be featured as the National Challenge winner in the Bird Sleuth Investigator and receive a $100 coupon for bird food. So you can keep feeding your bird feeding habit. So definitely check that out. We would love to have more people join and more people submit to the Bird Sleuth Investigator. And with that, that's a pretty broad overview of schoolyard investigations. I hope you found those case studies interesting and inspiring. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know in the chat window. Otherwise, please do keep in touch. We have a new website, so if you haven't visited it yet, check it out. It's really beautiful, birds.cornell.edu/K12. And we also have an email address, k12lab@cornell.edu. We also offer completion certificates for our webinars, so if you would like a certificate for one contact hour, please send us an email at k12lab@cornell.edu, and we can get that pulled together for you.
I'm just going to plug in real quick here. This is Lindsay. For some reason in the chat window, it's deciding to combine my comments into one massive URL, even though they're submitted separately.
Oh, no.
So I just wanted to let people know that in the recording, there will be a list of all the URLs. So I'm realizing this now that some of them are screwed up.
So definitely look for the YouTube video to go up, possibly Friday, possibly Monday, and it will have on the YouTube channel all the links there.
Yeah, exactly.